All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Lang, Birds and Bees and Kids, and welcome to your Pro Quickie. These are conversations I have where I teach for about 10 minutes on a specific topic related to sexuality and childhood, and then we do 10 minutes or so of Q&A. The Q&A time is anything goes. You can ask me anything you want, on topic, off topic. I don't care. I just want to be a resource for you. And then at the end, I've got a couple things going on that I want to let you know about. And then, we'll see what's happening next month, which I can't remember. So y'all got an email and I won't be surprised. So today we're going to be talking about the definition of child sexual abuse. And so I like to make things really simple and easy to digest. And so I'm going to give you a technical definition of child sexual abuse. The problem with, especially when we're looking at kid-to-kid abuse, is that it's a little bit different. So we'll talk about that. So the general definition that I use is any sexual touch, contact, conversation, a behavior with a child by an adult or an older child. So this also includes porn exposure. We used to not talk about that, but y'all are grown. You know how seeing pornography can be traumatic. So imagine you're 7. So it's really about that abuse by an older child and an adult. And when we're looking at younger kids, the older child, what we look for is 3 or more years older, or a developmental difference. So you can have a 7-year-old who is more like a 5-year-old or 4-year-old, and that 7-year-olds are playing, they're not the same. Also just developmental difference, physiological differences, those kids are more vulnerable. And what gets confusing about child sexual abuse is that it sometimes just generic, regular sexual behavior, sexual play, people get confused. It looks like it's abuse because it involves private parts. And this is just perfect timing because I just got off the phone. I do quickies for parents too. And I just got off the phone with a gal whose 3-year-old daughter was in a tree house with a 7.5-year-old boy. Gender doesn't necessarily matter. But in a casual conversation with her aunt over FaceTime, the aunt said, "Hey, what'd you do this weekend? How'd it go? What was fun? What was," and the 3-year-old just pipes up and says, "Oh yeah, when I was in the treehouse with this kid, we played kissing privates." And so the mom, I was like, thank God she wasn't talking to you, because the mom could do all of her processing. And the aunt was great and said, "Oh, what happened? What was that like for you?" And the thing with that, we all know what that means, right? This 7-year-old's been exposed to something or is being abused. And so, yeah. So the thing about this circumstance is that when we hear that kind of thing, which is clearly adult-like, right? I mean, the kissing privates isn't something a grown-up would say, but that's something that a kiddo would, that's how they would make sense of something like this. So what can happen is that we have our adult, we know, right? Oh God, the kid's been exposed to oral sex somehow. And so then when we look at the behavior they're engaging in, I don't know if this is a word, we kind of adultify it. But then the reality is that kiddo, that 7-year-old, was just trying to work out what he saw. It's not okay, right? That's not safe behavior. And we can just jump to, he's a perpetrator, he molested her, she's got to be damaged from this, because we're putting our adult perspective on them. If you think about it from the 4-year-old, or 3, she was almost 4, 3 or 4-year-old's perspective, this was a weird thing that happened. And she said that, I didn't like it. It was fine. It was okay, but I didn't really like it. And then that was kind of it. Right. But if the mom, who was amazing, had gone in and said, "What happened? Oh my God, that's not okay. That should never happen. This is terrible. You're ruined," which is, of course, the impulse, right? We're scared. And she didn't. She was really chill. And she said, "Tell me more. Show me with your Barbies." Brilliant. And she showed her and she said, "You know what? Thanks for telling me. You're really brave to tell me. We'll make sure he gets help." So I guess what I'm saying is, we have to check our impulse. right? But in this particular circumstance that I'm telling you about, older kid, right? 4 years older, right? He hopefully knows that it's not okay or safe to do anything, play games with privates. From what she told me about the family, that chances are slim that that's not happening at their house. So we have this age difference, absolutely concerning. We have what they did. Is it sexually abusive? For those of you who are popping in late, a 3-year-old had a 7-year-old kiss her privates, is what she said. So is that sexually abusive? Technically, right? Older kid, sexual thing with the privates, but for her, maybe not. One of the things the mom asked me is like, should I have her see a therapist? And I said no, because just wait, right? Just wait and watch her behavior. When you have more conversations, see how she's doing. If she's getting, anxiety symptoms, if she can't stop talking about it, then absolutely she probably needs to talk to someone. But the thing about little people is, especially before puberty, that when they get help with this, they recover really quickly. Depending on what happens, it's usually a year or so of therapy. If like in this circumstance, it would be just super quick, I'm guessing. So pretty quickly recover, which is good news, and then go on to lead healthy, happy lives. One of the things, so if we look at this 7.5-year-old boy, if he's being abused, which is, it's porn exposure or it's abuse, right? It's porn exposure or it's abuse. We used to not have to worry about porn exposure. That's where I go first now. If this kid has had ongoing porn exposure, that is sexually abusive. If somebody obviously is doing something with him, then that's sexually abusive. That kiddo will need longer, different kind of more intensive therapy. So the thing with the sexual abuse is that it gets gray with kids, a little gray. Obviously, anybody that is 5-year-olds, maybe, right? Maybe consistent behavior. And some of you may have seen something like this where over and over again, a 5-year-old is compulsively engaging in sexual play or sexualized behavior with another kid. That can be abusive, but we usually are looking for this big age difference. And there's some red flags with kids. Like I had a mom one time tell me she had a 5 and a 4-year-old, 5 and a 3-year-old, and there's this 10-year-old kid that wanted to come down and play with them all the time. And it was giving her the creeps. Like there was something off about that. And we talked about it. And if you think about, 10-year-olds, they generally don't want to play with younger kids. They want to get paid to play with younger kids, right? Babysitting, it's a job. There was something about him that was giving her a bad vibe, right? Our intuition is often accurate. And so she was just, kind of pinging off that. And I said, tell him, adios, right? Go find kids your own, in a nice way. Go find your kids your own age. So kind of paying attention to those things. For most people who have vaginas, we are really taught to dampen down our intuition. We want to we like to say, oh, I'm just being weird. But the reality is your intuition is rarely wrong. You know that, right? But when you have that moment where you're like, I'm fine. And then you're like, I'm sorry, we all know I swear, right? Slap. I need to find a new word. Crap. I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that thing or whatever, right? So working with children, it is just trust your gut. If it ain't right, if it doesn't feel right, it's not right. If you have a coworkers are so tough because these guys, it's usually men, women abused too, they look great. They don't smell bad. You don't get a bad vibe from them. They can kind of talk their way out of stuff. They're charming generally. They aren't that icky, creepy guy. That's just not how they operate. There was a person that worked for the Boys and Girls Club in Seattle, and he was terrific. Everybody loved him. And there was one young gal that he groomed, and he was really sophisticated about it. He said all the right things to her. You're super special. You're my favorite. Hey, Jennifer. Oh, thank you. He's paid special attention to her. He gave her special jobs. He snuck and met her. Her parents knew this was funky and so didn't forbade her from seeing him, but they still snuck around. And so the staff is watching all this, and individual people saw him doing stuff with her and didn't say anything. And she'd be in his office doing stuff. That was not typical. They do overnights with groups of kids. That's not typical. And then the shitty thing is that to get ahead of it when it started to smell like trouble was heading his way, because someone found out, I don't know how, that and he said that he his boss pissed me. I didn't initiate this. Hey, Jennifer, will you mute yourself? I would do it, but I don't feel so sophisticated right now. So he got ahead of it. She finally confessed. Excuse me. Where are you? One moment, please. Where'd you go? Jennifer. Oh, she's muted. That's weird. Okay, sorry. She finally confided in a staff person and said, she said, this has been happening with him. I don't know how to make it stop. And then lawsuits and the whole 9 yards. And it was hard to see. But if everyone had been talking to each other, and if the person that saw her in the office and the person that was like, this is too close, like he's giving her rides home, total no-no. And if people had talked to each other, if their corporate culture was that when you see something, you say something, then this wouldn't have gone on. He would have been caught sooner. And these folks, they do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. I think the stat is that people who molest kids do it over 200 times before they're caught. That doesn't mean 200 kids. It means 200, 200 incidents. So it's ucky and yucky. And the hard part is if you're working with someone and you're like, oh, I got the bad vibe from them. And then you go to your boss and the boss is like, they're terrific. And nobody has the right kind of training to be able to pick apart this. Like, you don't have a corporate, like a rule where if you see something, you say something, it doesn't matter. Then people are going to go fly under the radar. There was another guy at a childcare here who, no offense against clowns, but he was like a clown on the weekend or something. And he was really goofy and really fun and always gave people the creeps and let him continue to work with kids. You can't fire someone for giving you the creeps, right? But what do you do with someone like that? What do you do with someone like that? So there's an organization called Committee for Children that's in Seattle, and I will send this out when I send the recording. I'm just writing it down. And they have this really great program, and part of the program is a bunch of like forms for people to fill out when they get hired that weed out the bad folks in this department. They have a whole lot, they have online training and stuff. Of course, I'm way more fun, but they have this really good back end kind of business side stuff that I love. And, it's maybe better for bigger organizations. I don't know how much it costs. I can't remember, but it's super cool to have something that people have to fill out that makes that person think, oh, I'm not working for this organization. They will smell me 1.5 miles away. So, I think too, that I'm going to stop talking in 1 second so you can ask me questions. I think also if you're in a position that you can hire people, that you just straight up make it really clear. Like, we talk about this. We are well trained. If we see an adult engaging in a behavior that's a red flag or even a pink flag behavior, we talk about it. Our staff is empowered to talk about it. And then lay out the rules about, no giving rides, blah, 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 like all that stuff. And just say the words. And if you are clear and firm, it's like working with children. If you're clear and firm, and this is part of your hiring process, they will stay away. They'll be more likely to stay away. But anything kind of just not talking about it's not going to make it end. And the shit part is that person's going to go someplace else, right? you're going to go someplace else. All right. I said a lot of things. I'm not going to say anything. Ask me questions. And I have to hide myself. God, I keep looking at myself. Wow. All right. Hi. Oh, much better. Go ahead, Abby, and then I'll get you, Joanne.
Yeah, Amy, I was just wondering if you had a chance to watch any of the Senate hearings with the women's gymnastics team this morning before.
Oh, no.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, I'm going to watch them. It's heartbreaking, isn't it? Have you listened to the podcast about him?
No, but I have followed the story. But I mean, you talk about systems. I believe, I'm not sure I heard this correctly, but I believe they were supposed to have testimony from the FBI people afterwards. I think they blew them off. I think they didn't show up. So it's so riveting. It's so powerful. And those young women who were children at the time.
Yeah.
And then the cover up through the FBI, it's phenomenal. I mean, you've obviously maybe followed it better than I have, but I was wondering if you had any reaction to the testimony, because the girls all spoke this morning.
I haven't watched it. I listened. There's a great podcast, which I will send you the link to that, about this whole thing. It is the one of the girls that was a family friend told her parents, he has been molesting me, and they did not believe her. And she eventually said, I take it back. I take it back. Yeah, I will probably go watch that. So just hearing their personal stories too shows you how insidious it is. So yeah, thanks, Abby, for sharing that. Blech. Great way to start the day. Believed. Thank you, Alexandra. Love Darkness to Light. Thank you, Joanne, for asking about that. That is another sexual abuse prevention organization. I'm a trained Darkness to Light person. I can teach it. But but there are some blanks in there, mainly around the sexual behavior in kids piece. Like they don't help you understand, how I come at this from that different perspective, right? I don't teach signs and symptoms. I teach like what's normal. So they miss that, but a whole lot of it is really good, and it's so convenient and it's really well done. Darkness to Light is a sexual abuse prevention program, and it's really great. I'll send you the link to that too. They're really terrific, and affordable too. So lots of great resources there. Yeah, thank you, Joanne. They're great. They're really good. They've been around for a long time. All right. Anything else? What else you got? Now remember, anything goes with the Q&A time. If you have something going on you want help with, or just to check a scenario from the past, sometimes that's helpful too. And we're all going to learn together and that kind of thing.
I have a lot of questions.
Go for it. We're all going to learn.
So the first question is, like in the example that you gave with the 7-year-old, and you said like you don't think that the parents had addressed any of it. How as a parent do you go about that? Addressing it with the other parent, and then like making sure that your kid is safe, but also not like re-traumatizing your kid.
Yeah, this is a great question, because it works for everybody, right? So if you work with kids and something happens, you have to manage the family, right? Of both families, right? So with talking to the parent of the child who's the perpetrator, a few things, one of the main things especially in parenting, is to say something along the lines of, if the tables were turned, I would want to know that this had happened. And talking about, I'm concerned for your child, I'm not, and being really clear, like you're worried about their kid, you're worried about your kid, but you really want to make sure that their child, it sounds like they might need some help. So when we say help, people like help, right? Help is friendly. And this requires you to put your big kid underpants on and be your kind of higher self sometimes. In an organization, if you're talking with a parent, absolutely have another person there. It helps keep things more chill, right? It helps keep things more chill. It's hard for someone to get super Looney Tunes when there's another parent there. I think most organizations have a process for how they go through handling this conversation. One of the big tips is, when you're talking to the parents, be super simple. This is what happened. This is what I said. This is what I did. This is what I will be doing. And using small words, don't say inappropriate. Everybody know Amy hates the word inappropriate. Don't say inappropriate, say not okay, not safe. You want to, and then I'm a big fan of practice. So if you're in an organization, you practice with your colleague until you feel pretty good about it. Have notes, it's not cheating. Have notes, and then at the end of the day, remember the focus is to get that kid help, right? Think your kiddo needs some help. In a parenting circumstance, well, you need to talk about what you're going to do. So if with your own kiddo, you can say, you know, we've had these conversations, you know, just want to make sure everybody understands the body safety rules, reading some books. For the time, it usually happens between kids who are good friends. So, you know, and you know, families have divorces over this depending on what's gone on, right? So if it's just typical sexual play, then there shouldn't be a families divorcing. But like, okay, and you know, now when the kids are together, let's just have an agreement that where they're never out of sight, right? Common play space, and maybe shorter play dates. And this usually passes when kids are engaging this kind of stuff. So having some new structure and rules like that. Also having the kids come to your house, because you know you are going to do the right thing, right? You know you are not going to do the right thing. And then you got to be ready for a major parental freakout. That happens. So many reasons, right? Personal history. If there's ongoing sexual abuse in the family unit, it's usually somebody they know, then the parent will overreact or underreact, right? So they're gonna, unfortunately, when sexual abuse is on the table, the adults collude to protect the other adults. Look at Larry Nassar, the effing FBI protected him, right? So believe the child. They don't, I mean, the false report rate is like, oh, you probably know, Joanne, do you know what it is? Is it 4%, 3% false report? Do you remember? Something like that? I can't remember.
It's between 2 and 6.
Yeah, it's
Between
super,
2 and 7.
yeah, really low. So believe them. And then if you're working with kids, your job is to be as kind and loving and yourself with both children. Because remember, with young kids, you know, if they're over 10 and they know what they're doing, but even then, but adolescent, you know, anybody over 12 or whatever, like definitely knows that that's not okay. And so they're going to be managed differently. Oh, what was I going to say? I can't remember. Oh yeah, I remember. So those, the way I talk about this is that they made a mistake. They made a mistake. They forgot the rules. We'll get them help, right? You don't want to say, even if it's Uncle Creepy, right? Uncle Creepy made a mistake. He forgot the body boundary rules. We're going to make sure he gets some help. And then you do all your swears and figuring out how you're going to, you know, chop off his junk on your own time, right? So you have to manage, you can just be calm because they love Uncle Creepy. Like Larry Nassar was really, really well respected and beloved in his community, right? And people had that gal who, her parents didn't believe her. He was blatant. He'd go downstairs and hang out with the kids. Who does that? Like, I don't hang out with the kids. I'm gonna go watch TV under the blankie with the kids, right? He was red flag-orama. Anyway, so that's another thing to remember. So, and in your center and your work, people will, yeah, grooming parents. Yeah, thanks, Lauren. People will, the families will leave, right? So if the child is accused of doing something that's sexualized and a problem, the family will pull the child because you're terrible, which is just heartbreaking, because the best place for them to be is with you, unless you have to remove them from the community, depending on what's been going on. But most of the time, the child can stay in the community as long as they're getting help and everybody understands what's happening and people can maintain that. Like, you have to remember, these are kids. They're not 35-year-old men or women for that matter. Sorry. Just talking stats over here. Yeah, so they're not, you know, they're not adults, right? So, and sometimes that can be hard, especially if the stuff's pretty egregious. It's pretty egregious. So, okay. I'll stop talking again. What you got? Yes, power grooming parents, right? That's what They do. They groom the parents. They just are great. And now I've made you all paranoid about every kind and loving adult. Hubby's like, no. Any other questions, thoughts, anything that's standing out for you from what I just said, what I just talked about? All right.
Well, I have one last one, I guess.
Yeah, please.
So is it getting worse or is it getting better?
Ugh. It's getting, here's what I think is getting worse. I think what's getting worse is the sexualized play between kids because they're seeing porn.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't know what to do with it and they're acting it out, which then can become abusive, right? So this situation with the 7.5-year-old and the 3-year-old, if that was to continue, definitely would land in the area of abusive, right? But the one-off, not necessarily abusive. Everybody's wired differently. Like I said, parental reaction can cause trauma, that kind of thing. But I think what's happening is this porn exposure is rampant. And it is not like kids don't have the, like as adults, if we run into porn, we're like, I'm okay, I am not okay, right? And we know what our limit of tolerance is. If you're 9 and you're seeing this thing and you're like, ooh, interesting, gross, ooh, okay, and you keep going and going and going, you don't get, they can't stop, and so they're seeing stuff that is stuff that I shouldn't speak, that I would be like, can't unsee things. And frankly, parents don't get it. They think my kid would never. But then if I had this, I would have been Googling sex and dick and all kinds of stuff, and I would have been right in it. I loved Aubrey Shapiro's dad's Playboy magazines under his mattress. Right? Like that's how I'm wired. And also obviously here I am, a curiosity about sexuality. So the biggest thing is that parents have their heads in the sand, and it's so hard on me because a lot of it's never going to be avoidable, but we can mitigate what's happening. So to your question, I think it's getting worse from that, in that perspective, from that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I struggle because I have some older boys in my practice. I kind of make the assumption if they have unfettered access to the internet that they're watching porn.
Absolutely.
It's just an assumption that I make. And that leads me to the adults in their lives. It's gone from watching TV to video games to gaming to, not that they're sharing those moments of watching porn, but that it's an accepted cultural phenomenon.
100%.
And so, I mean, that's a really hard one to combat,
yes.
Especially because their brains are getting wired at such a young age to be sensitized to it. And so it just seems like, not unlike the women's gymnastics fiasco, that it's such a big problem on so many different levels.
Mm-hmm.
And the pandemic has only made it worse because people are on their computers more and bored out their minds. And like, I mean, I assume like you just got to go at it from some angle, whatever you can, whatever you have access to. Yeah. There's no big solution, but
yeah, there's really, I mean, one of the biggest solution is to make sure that kids are really sex educated and understand healthy sexuality and have places to go to get their rocks off that isn't porn. And we can't avoid the porn, but having them understand the impact. But it's very hard, not every kid gets addicted to it and uses it compulsively, but they use it. Like they'll have porn on and do homework. And one of my colleagues and friends, Joe Langford, he works with boys who sexually offend, and it's all the porn. And, he helps them recover. But yeah, it's hugely influential, and it is terrible for women of color, like everybody, like body image and all of that. It's just got this far reaching negative impact. There's an organization that I cannot remember the name of. That's
The Good Fight.
There's Fight the New Drug. That's one. There's another one. Gail Dines runs it. Again, I will find it for you. And it's anti-porn organization, and they're doing some pretty good work. There's some things that I don't agree with her, but overall, it's really, people are trying to manage this, but it comes down to parents. It comes down to sex education. It comes down to having like comprehensive sexuality education. It comes down to talking about sexual desire, sexual urges, how to manage that. You know, Joe tells his clients half the time, sorry, graphic, half the time you jerk off, just use your head and not the porn, because you know, anyway, so I could go on about porn forever. But yeah, it's definitely an impact, and kids are being exposed younger and younger and younger. And, you know, again, if you're working with kids, I would actually go on a campaign and help parents understand the need for having parental controls and monitoring, because it happens accidentally. It happens accidentally, and they don't expect it. Right? I had a 5-year-old family with a 5-year-old, and they were on vacation, and he was really into looking at pictures of pregnant people. And so the mom was with him, and they were looking at art and photographs, and might have even seen some birth and stuff like that. And then they kind of went their separate ways, and he still had the iPad. And then she was like, oh, he's got the iPad, went and found him. And she goes in the bedroom, and he's kind of under the covers, and he's got the iPad, and he goes, and she's like, great. And he had made his way to porn.
Yeah.
Not hard. So it happens like that. And we don't want to think it's going to happen, but that's those things, talking about it, being sex educated, putting monitoring parental controls in place. It's the seatbelt. You'd never let your kid get in the car without a seatbelt. Never. And it's not just the porn. You can go find out how to commit suicide, right? You can watch beheadings, right? There's all kinds of awful, violent, terrible stuff, you know, that's out there. And I think part of that is that, you know, we are not, well, some of you I know are digital natives, but a lot of us are not. And we came into this in this different mindset. So anywho, any other thoughts? KSARC. Oh yeah. KSARC. Yeah. So the rate, yeah, I believe that it has gone down, but also internet. Right. And people are more savvy and more willing to report. So it's two things. But I think the thing about sexual abuse is that we think it's physical. It's physical. It is not physical. Pornography can be sexually abusive. Right. So that's the kind of the piece that's missing. It'd be I haven't looked at the numbers in a long time, but yeah, it's not just physical. It's not just physical. So yay, fun. I didn't really prepare you much for this. Sorry, I just jumped in. Oh, well. Alexandra, you have another question? Oh, you're looking perky.
I have a lot.
We'll do one more and then we'll wrap up. I have things to tell you too, right?
Perfect.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Question. So what are some signs that a young person should seek therapy versus we'll kind of just talk to them about it and monitor?
So if they are, their mood changes, so they're depressed, they don't want to do the things they normally do, if they have heightened fear around going places and doing things, so we're really looking for behavior change, bedwetting, not eating, weirdness about their body, if they just don't seem like themselves, playing with toys and stuff and acting out whatever happened, and also talking about it, kind of repeatedly, regularly, but with just the typical sexual play, kind of playing doctor stuff, that's usually not traumatic, but sometimes it can be. Again, back to the 7.5-year-old and the 3-year-old, not a good thing. Mom handled it really, really well. She talked about it. She's talked about it a couple times. And since then, so we're monitoring. I said, if in a couple weeks she's still kind of hung up in it, then probably needs to have some play therapy just to make sure she's okay. But read some books, see how she's doing, that kind of thing. But you won't always know, right? You just won't always know. It's a rough one, right? I mean, we all know that. The kids that I grew up with that I found out later on were, one of my best friends her mom was not sexually abusive, but physically abusive, had no idea. She was just she was super mean, but I had no idea until later because we didn't talk about it. And this is even more, don't talk about it. All right, shall we take a big deep breath? How does that sound? Good, huh? Me too. Thank you. So here are the things I have going on. The main one is this. So if you are working for an organization and you think your bosses or you're the boss might be interested in having me come in to do a training, I'm doing free half-hour trainings for just like a taste like this. I won't be like this. I'll be less sweary and less specific, just to give a sense of what I teach, how I teach, just for the management, not for everybody. So I'll send you information about that. That's something that I'm working on. I just would like to reach more folks, as you can imagine. So it's just so they can see who I am, get a taste, and then have a conversation about how I work and what I'm up to. So that's the thing. The other thing is, just because I'm starting to talk about this, is that I'm on this campaign. I'm calling it Parent-Led Sex Ed. And what I'm doing is I'm asking other parents who are game for these conversations to just pick one person and encourage them, support them in these conversations, because it's just me. I've got great colleagues now. There are lots of people doing what I'm doing, but if we're all having this little bit of more of a mindset around, hey, let's share the love, let's spread the word. And same for y'all who are working with kids out in the field, just finding someone that you can say, hey, just learn this thing, just one person, right? And get their minds kind of tuned into it. I think, things are going to be better for kids, better for you, safer, right? Safer. So those are my two big excitements. I can't remember what we're doing next. I'm sure it'll be delightful. And you'll get your email from me. And then if you have follow-up questions or want to schedule a quickie with me, you've got something going on, please just email me back and we can make that happen. I think that's it for me. So I'm going to stop recording. And if you want to hang out a few minutes and ask some more questions, I'm fine to do that. All right. Thank you, human beings. Have a great rest of your day. Take some deep breaths.